Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you some of my favorite books that have some really great romance in them. Just in time for Valentine's Day, I thought it would be great to do a short little video that highlights some of my favorite literary romances. So not all of these are romance books necessarily, but they are books that feature romance in some way and some of my favorite literary couples. So without further ado, let's just get on into it. So the first book I'm going to feature today is a classic, and that is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy's romance writes the book on enemies to lovers. I said what I said. They are the OG enemies to lovers couple. These two absolutely despise each other on impact. The second they see each other, they hate each other. And again, it's the main plot of this story. This book is set and was written in the late 1800s by Jane Austen, one of the biggest literary writers of English history, I'd say. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I have a tattoo of one of the lines like written on my body. I absolutely adore it, and their romance was just spectacular. If you're not interested in reading the book, because it is kind of dense, it is dense language, I would recommend watching the 2005 movie version with Keira Knightley, because it is the top tier adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. But it's a great story of two people who on first impression hate each other and grow to love each other very deeply, and it's just a great romance for anybody to read. Next up is something that I would consider to be actually a modern classic now. So many people are obsessed with this series, and for good reason, or this book for good reason. I absolutely adore it, and it's one of my favorite romances of all time, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a retelling of the Iliad, so the story of the Trojan War, but from the point of view of Achilles' lover, Patroclus. This book is phenomenal, and the writing is just absolutely gorgeous, and the love between Achilles and Patroclus will just grip you right from the start. This story is tragic and heartbreaking and just such a absolutely wild ride from beginning to end. It absolutely hooked me, and it's one of the stories that just will stay with me forever. And if you're interested at all in Greek mythology, or even if you're not interested in Greek mythology and just want to read about a great romance, I 100% recommend picking up The Song of Achilles. Next up are a few adult romances that I have been getting into slowly but surely over the last year. I used to hate reading adult romance, but then I don't know what it was, something just clicked in me and I can't get enough of it right now. The first one is Well Met by Jen DeLuca. Well Met tells the story of Emily and Simon. Emily has just moved to the town of Willow Creek to help her sister, who was in a car accident, to help her take care of her little niece for the summer. When she gets there, she realizes that her niece has wanted to take part in the town's annual Renaissance Fair, which is created and run by their English teacher in the high school, who is Simon. Simon has taken over running this town's famous Renaissance Fair ever since his older brother passed it down to him. And again, this is another enemies to lovers, kind of hate to love type story. Emily gets roped into participating in the Ren Fair, and her and Simon connect slowly but surely, despite their differences right off the hop. This story's great. I love the Renaissance Fair setting. It's really interesting and really fun. It makes the story really, really, quite hilarious, and I absolutely adore it. But their romance is so sweet as well, especially towards the end. I just absolutely love their bickering, and then when they finally get together, it's just like that aha moment. Absolutely adore it. If you want something light and fluffy, 100% recommend Well Met. Next up, this is probably my favorite adult romance book I've ever read, and that is Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the second book in the Brown Sisters trilogy, which are 3 books set in the same world following the same 3 sisters, but on their own little journeys. They each can stand on their own as single books. This is the newest release, and it follows both Zaph and Danny. Danny is a headstrong PhD candidate in English and women's studies. She is also a practicing witch and a super independent woman. She does not want a relationship. She doesn't want anything to do with it. She just wants to do her research and have some fun and get on with her life, basically. Zaph is a security guard at her school who is a former rugby player and who owns a nonprofit to help kids through rugby. The two of them end up in a kind of precarious situation where they have to pretend to be together in order to help bring promotion to Zap's charity. And so it's a great fake dating trope, and I adore it. This one isn't enemies to lovers, it's more friends to lovers, because these two are like longtime acquaintances. They've known each other for quite a while, and they get along quite well before this situation. But it's such a great book. I absolutely adore their romance. These two just make me so happy every time I think of them. And I just love it. Zap is so sweet. And Danny is such a headstrong character that I absolutely relate to and I love so much. And I can't get enough of this book. You have to read it. Next up is actually my most recent read, but it's one that really stuck out to me. And that is Worst Best Man by Mia Souza. This tells the story of Lena and Max. Lena is a super successful wedding planner who actually got left at the altar herself and is trying to move on without bringing attention to her own unsuccessful marriage. And Max was the best man and little brother to the man who left Lena at the altar, and supposedly the reason he did so. This follows Lena as she is given a great opportunity to make headway in her career, but in order to do so she has to work with Max, the man who disintegrated her marriage. Again, this is another enemies to lovers, hate to love kind of story, and I absolutely adored it. Their dynamic was super great. Max is the sweetest thing on the planet, and I absolutely adored him. He was so cute and just so thoughtful. Lena was a great main character. I absolutely adored looking at her point of view, especially coming from such a rich background and dealing with the stigma that comes with her career path and what it means to be a successful woman in the world with her own business and dealing with such a happy-go-lucky field such as wedding planning. I don't know, I thought this was such a sweet little read. I read it super quickly, so it's a great fast-paced book if you're looking for it, and the romance was just absolutely adorable. Next up is a young adult contemporary, and that is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. This story tells the story of Imani, who is a young teen mom who absolutely adores cooking. She is a senior in high school and is given the opportunity to try and raise money in order to go on a special trip with her cooking class at her school to go to Spain to learn how to cook. The romance between Imani and the love interest Malachi is absolutely precious. This book is just so heartwarming. Elizabeth Acevedo's books tend to focus on very tragic events and very intense topics. And while this doesn't shy away from that, this book is much lighter and much more fun-filled than her other two books, in my opinion. And it's one of my favorites for that reason. This is such a fun read. It's super quick, and just the romance is sweet. Malachi is one of the sweetest boys I have ever read about in my life. He just wants to make Imani happy, just wants to be there for her and her daughter, and their romance is just absolutely adorable. I absolutely love it, and I think everybody should give this book a try. It's one of the best books I've ever read. Next up is a YA fantasy, actually, and that is We Hunt the Flame by Hafsa Faisal. So this story follows Zafira, who is the famed hunter in her world. She goes into this magical forest to provide for her family. She does this disguised as a man because in the state that she lives in, it is very misogynistic, very sexist, and they wouldn't have gone over well if anybody knew she was a woman who was hunting. But anyway, her prowess catches the attention of the Sultan, and she is tasked with going into this magical isle called Shar, where this magical forest resides, in order to bring back a certain magical relic that will help bring magic back to the land. Her love interest and the other main character in the story is Nasir, who is the crown prince and also an assassin. He's known as the Prince of Death. He is also sent into the Isle of Shar after Saphira, with the intense purposes of killing her once she finds the relic and bringing the relic back to the Sultan. Another enemies to lovers, because I absolutely adore that trope. And this one is another tropey filled one person has to kill the other kind of forbidden romance. Nasir and Zafira are one of the best literary couples I've ever read about in my entire life. These two are fantastic. This is great slow burn romance, which some of these aren't very slow burn, but this one is. The two of them just, I don't even know, it's just one of the best romances ever. They are just so caring and so they're so into each other and they hate it at one point, and it just is such a great part of this book. It is ingrained in the story, their love, and it's just one of the best aspects of this entire world. Read it. 100% read it. And then it wouldn't be me, and I wouldn't be talking about literary romances if I didn't bring up the works of Sarah J Maas. So these two series are Court of Thorns and Roses and Throne of Glass. Have two of my favorite, or actually more than two of my favorite literary couples in the world. I won't give any spoilers because Sarah J Maas books are very complicated and have lots of twists and turns, so I won't go too crazy. A Court of Thorns and Roses tells the story of Feyre Archeron, who is brought into the world of the Fae in her fantasy type world. After killing a wolf in her world, she learns that it's actually a Fae that she killed, and the High Lord of the Spring Court comes down into the human lands in order to take her as punishment. Very loosely retelling of Beauty and the Beast. But this series has one of my favorite romances of all time, and I don't know how to do this without spoiling it. Yeah, I can't say who it is without spoiling it. If you haven't read this, please give it a go. It's got some of the best romance, I think, written in a adult fantasy series. This is marketed as YA. It is not YA. This is an adult fantasy series, 100% adult fantasy. But if you're interested in a high fantasy fae type world, 100% go for it. Airfire. This book is the book that introduced my favorite couple in this series. I will leave it at that. Again, I don't want to do any spoiling. Throne of Glass is another high fantasy series, adult fantasy series written by Sarah J Maas. This was her first series, and it tells the story of Selena Sardothian, who is a famed assassin. In prison before the start of the series, she is brought out of prison by the Crown Prince, Dorian Havillard, in order to compete for him as his champion in this new competition set by the king. Whoever wins this competition becomes the king's champion and is pardoned of all of their crimes after serving him for 5 years. Selena takes this chance right away and finds out that there's something much darker creeping around in this castle, in this world, and sets herself on a path to figure out what's going on, solve the mystery, and also to win her freedom. This is the third book in the series, and this is the one that introduces my favorite romance in the series. If you've read it before, you know who I'm talking about. But again, I don't want to spoil it, so I won't say it right off the bat. Again, another great introduction to high fantasy. This is a super popular series, and I think for good reason. I absolutely adore it. And I think you should give it a go if you're interested. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed this short little foray into my favorite literary romances. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up because it really does support my channel, and leave me a comment down below letting me know your favorite literary romance. If you're new here, please subscribe. I put out new bookish videos every week, and I hope you guys have a lovely day. Bye-bye.